I wanted to record a video that covered two of the core concepts that exist within the Gurdjieff fourth way work. That's self-observation and self-remembering. I hope you find this video useful. I won't get too into the details on who George Gurdjieff was, as there's lots of information on the internet on this person already. At a high level, George Gurdjieff was an Armenian Georgian philosopher, mystic, spiritual teacher, take your pick. And in the latter half of the 1800s and the first half of the 1900s, he brought, by his own admission, a hidden teaching from the East into the West. Now, Gurdjieff's chief assertion was that man, as he knew him then, and certainly as we know him today in 2023, man exists in a state of deep sleep. And what we call waking consciousness is actually just another degree of unconscious sleep. Gurdjieff suggested that we don't really know what authentic higher consciousness is. And in order for us to reach this real consciousness, it was possible through the use of certain practices, two of which I'll be covering in this video today: self-observation and self-remembering. Now, chances are if you're watching this video, you already know something about Gurdjieff. You already have some kind of information on the fourth way. But in case you don't, I have another video that I'll try and link in the description here, if I can figure out how to do it on YouTube, that will give you a breakdown of what the other ways are. So Gurdjieff's way is called the fourth way because it differs from the three more traditional or better known ways of reaching higher consciousness. The way of the fakir, that's the way of using your body to reach higher consciousness. The way of the monk, that's using your emotions to reach higher consciousness. Or the way of the yogi, which uses the mind to reach higher consciousness. Gurdjieff's fourth way really is a combination of the first three ways. And it's a practical way that enables people to stay within society, to stay within life, while attempting to reach this elusive goal of higher consciousness. Self-observation. As the term suggests, self-observation is an observation of yourself. However, it differs from other similar meditative practices, which also emphasize an observation of what's going on within, by splitting up your observation into three parts. So in the Gurdjieff work, the emphasis is on watching your body, that is your physical body, the way it moves. Maybe you have a body posture at any given point. You also watch your emotional state. Is there a state of happiness, of sadness, of anxiety maybe? At the moment when you're self-observing. And you also observe your thoughts, your mental state. Are there thoughts that are passing through in the background? Are you distracted by something? Is there an idea, is there a monologue that's flowing through your mind while you're self-observing? So self-observation in the Gurdjieff work is really a combination of these three. You try and cycle through whatever sensations are going on in your body. Sensation of yourself sitting on a chair, for example, or right now you're listening to this video, the sensation of the earphones maybe in your ear, or your feet touching the ground. You then cycle through your emotional states. And this can be harder because we don't always clearly see our emotional states, but you try and look within and you perceive, is there an emotion that's currently present within me? Maybe it's a sense of calm. Maybe it's anxiety. You then do the same thing with your thoughts. You cycle through your thoughts and you say, at this moment while I'm self-observing, is there a monologue playing? Am I thinking about something else? Is there maybe a bit of a song that's playing in the background? So self-observation in the Gurdjieff work is a combination of these three. Now to begin with, it's enough that you sit with it for maybe 5 minutes a day. That's pretty difficult to do. And I'd suggest that you pick a certain time of the day that you practice self-observation in a consistent way. So maybe you decide every day at noon, I'm going to sit down with myself in a quiet place, compose myself, and self-observe. I'm going to observe what's going on with my body at the time. I'm going to observe what's going on with my emotions. And I'm going to observe what's going on with my mind. Now, it's really important that you don't judge and you don't analyze what you see. In the beginning, all we want to achieve while self-observing is collecting data, collecting information on ourselves. We're trying to observe what common patterns, what common trends emerge. We're trying to become more deeply aware of sensations within our body. We're trying to become aware of body postures that we tend to automatically relapse into. We're trying to become aware of emotional states that are common to us. And we're trying to become aware of the different thoughts that typically cycle through our mind. Self-observation is really difficult. It's difficult because your mind tends to wander. And this is also why you have to take care to not judge, to not analyze what you're observing. Because it's really easy as you start to see aspects of your personality that you may not have observed before and aspects that you may not like. It's very easy to start to analyze it further, and before you know it, your attention is lost. It's identified with that thought, and you're lost down that rabbit hole. So, the correct way to self-observe is to gently keep bringing your attention back and cycling through the parts that make up all of your being. Your physical body, your emotional states, and your mind. So that's self-observation. Self-remembering is a far more interesting concept than self-observation, and it's quite unique to the Gurdjieff work. Self-remembering is based on the assertion that Gurdjieff makes that in any given moment, in what we term waking consciousness, a person does not remember themselves. Now, this sounds absurd at first, but through persistent self-observation, it is possible to verify this objective fact. Most of the time, we tend to be absorbed by whatever it is that has taken our attention in any given moment. So, in the example of you being seated at dinner with a bunch of friends and family, you're taken by the conversation at the table. Perhaps someone who's sitting next to you starts to tell you a story and you start to engage them. Parts of your personality that they're familiar with start to emerge within you. And you're engrossed in the story. You're engrossed in having a good time. But in that moment, you don't remember yourself. The idea of you doesn't exist. You are completely caught up in whatever has taken your attention at that time. Self-remembering aims to correct this. We do experience glimpses of self-remembering. And a good example of this is, think of the last time you went on vacation, when you went to a brand new place, maybe a beautiful place. And there's this overwhelming sense of, it's me here in this place right now. And you take in your surroundings a little more than you normally would because it's all new. The sensations are new. Your emotional state is heightened. You're aware of the sense of calm or happiness or excitement. And your thoughts are taking in your new surroundings as well. This is as close as we come to self-remembering in our everyday waking consciousness as is possible. Because without effort, without putting in the work, we tend to not remember ourselves in any given moment. So, self-remembering is a combination with self-observation. The two are supposed to occur together. So in the Gurdjieff work, we combine self-observation with self-remembering. And the way you do this is while you're observing yourself, while you're observing the parts that make up all of your being, as you're cycling through what's happening within your physical body, your emotional state, and your mind, you gently split your attention up and you maintain a part of it that says, this is me observing myself at this point. So if I were to practice self-observation and self-remembering right now, I'd say to myself, to begin with, this is Dwayne speaking into a microphone. And I'd cycle through my body, I'd cycle through my emotions, I'd cycle through my mind, while paying attention to the fact that it is me, it is uniquely me that's present in this moment doing all of this. So the more you practice this, interesting things start to happen. You genuinely start to gain a degree of what you can truly call self-consciousness. Because now you have a sense of the observer, that unique observer that's observing yourself at any given moment, that unique sense of I starts to emerge. Normally, only snippets of our personality come into play, and we are usually unaware when we are doing it. We just very naturally lapse into certain roles with family or with friends, and we do it unconsciously. We don't realize that it's happening. But when you practice self remembering and you combine it with self observation, you start to become aware of the unique you, the unique observer that's present and watching the parts of your personality manifest through your body, through your emotions, and through your mind at any given point. This is difficult to do. It should be obvious even as I'm describing this that this is a difficult practice, which is why you begin with self-observation and then you layer in self-remembering. And the more you can practice self-observation and self-remembering in everyday life, the better the quality of data that you're able to collect. The more objective is the quality of data that you're able to collect. That gives you insight into different aspects of your personality which you may not otherwise be aware of. So, in the same example of being at a dinner with family and friends, if you were to practice self-observation, while you're seated at the table, the sensation of yourself seated on a chair, or maybe you're sipping soup and the sensation of the soup entering your mouth, or the feelings that emerge as someone starts to speak with you, or you start to observe your body language, you start to see parts of your personality emerge that are very natural for you. They represent objective data on who you actually are. When you layer in self-observation and self-remembering, you enter a unique state where you are highly self-conscious of yourself. Now again, this is easier said than done. You'll start to notice that if you practice both self-observation and self-remembering in any social situation, it's really difficult to do this well. People may start to notice, they may start to look at you a little funny. Like, what are you doing? Because a lot of this is internal, right? It's very difficult to try and observe everything that's going on within your body, within your emotions, within your mind, while also playing out parts of your personality that are acceptable in society, that your friends and family recognize. But the more you practice this, the more effort you put into this, you start to get better at practicing self-observation and self-remembering while in different social settings and contexts. And the aim initially is simply to collect data, simply collect objective data on your personality, on yourself, on the different manifestations of your body, the body language as it shows up, in certain situations. Like right now, you, the person that's listening to this, what pose are you in? Do you typically adopt that pose? Are you conscious when you automatically slip into that pose? So self-observation starts to bring an awareness of how often you engage in certain poses. It brings an awareness of the tone that you use when you speak, which is also part of your body. It brings an awareness of the emotional states that may be present. And the emotional states are often very difficult to get a hold of because we are not accustomed to clearly observing our emotions at play. But self-observation and self-remembering, they start to give you the data that you need to get a clear picture of how you appear to other people. Often what you see will not be pleasing. You'll start to see weaknesses. You'll start to see things about yourself that you are tempted to judge. And it's really important that you don't judge, that you don't analyze, particularly in the beginning. All you need to do is observe, collect your data. Try to not get lost in a thought, in an identification. When you see something about yourself, particularly that you may not like, try to not chase that thought. Try to not chase that emotion. Because if that happens, then that takes you away from self-observation. It takes you away from self-remembering. So the goal is really to combine the two, as I said, combine self-observation, combine self-remembering, and try and get as much objective data about the different parts of yourself as possible. At the same time, self-remembering starts to build the idea of a unique I within yourself. You start to be aware of yourself in any given situation, and you start to see the different parts of your personality manifest in any given situation. It's really difficult to do. Another word of caution or advice that I want to offer is, especially in the beginning, is be careful of where and when you practice self-observation and self-remembering. Don't practice it at the gym. Don't practice it while driving a vehicle or while operating heavy machinery. It should be pretty obvious why you shouldn't be doing this. It's difficult as it is to cycle through what's happening within your body, your emotions in your mind, without doing something that requires all of your attention. So be very careful about where you practice this. Be very careful of how you practice this and when. Just as I said, even in social settings, if you try to practice self-observation and self-remembering, this can come across as a bit strange to people who may not understand what's going on, because of course all of this observation is happening internally for you. So be wary of where you practice this. Build it up in slow degrees. Begin first by sitting down by yourself, as I said. Practice self-observation first. Start to get a taste of what the practice is all about. Another piece of useful advice I can offer is, when observing yourself, observe internally. Try to not let your imagination get in the way of observation. So what I mean by this is, when you're observing your physical body, for instance, right? Maybe your feet are touching the floor. You need to try and sense your feet touching the floor from within your body. And you don't need to imagine an image of your feet on the floor. The same is true with your feelings. Try to not let your thoughts define your feelings, but rather try to figure out what the feeling is and where it manifests. Does it appear in a certain part of your body, for example? Initially, this can be really hard. There's a lot of muddling, there's a lot of confusion between all of these parts of yourself. And that's primarily because we've never been taught by our parents, by our teachers, by society, because most people don't self-observe. They are not accustomed to seeing these different parts of themselves. So it takes a bit of practice to start to clearly categorize what you're seeing within yourself. It takes a bit of practice to clearly see the difference between what is the physical body, what are sensations, what's instinct, what are reflexes, and separate those from what are genuine emotions, whether it's happiness, sadness, fear, and separate those again from the thoughts. You could be thinking in pictures, you could be thinking in images, but that's again separate from your emotions, it's separate from your body. So the more you self-observe, the more you start to get accustomed to observing the different parts of your being in action. And that's the aim here. The aim is to combine self-observation with self-remembering as often as possible as you start to get better at it, so that you gain snapshots of your different personalities, of the different parts of your egos as they manifest. You start to collect data on what you're actually like in a social setting. Very valuable data. And as time passes on, you will notice a change, and people around you will possibly also start to notice a change, because the very act of self-observation and self-remembering, it throws a light onto parts of your being that were otherwise unconscious before. There's a lot of material on self-observation and on self-remembering on the internet these days. There are possibly videos on it as well. But I wanted to say that for anyone who's really seeking out practice, the important part of the Gurdjieff work is the emphasis on work, on the practice. You really need to take a lot of the theory and put it into practice. And don't take anyone's word for it. There are lots of charlatans on the internet. I could be one of them. So don't take my word for it either. But practice it for yourself. Try and verify for yourself what is being said. Try and observe for yourself. Try and see what's going on within yourself. Try and self-remember. Try and get a feel, a taste of the practice and persist at it. That's what brings the most value. The reason why the fourth way is called the work is because we are expected to work on ourselves. And Gurdjieff himself predicted and said the fourth way would never be popular, because people, even back then, people wanted shortcuts to higher levels of being and higher consciousness. And how is that possible? You have to do the work. You have to do the work on yourself, within yourself, in order to gain a higher level of understanding and being. So I hope this video was helpful for you. If you liked it, like the video, subscribe and comment. And I hope you'll follow me, because I do plan on saying more on this and similar subjects as they relate to the fourth way, but also generally on spirituality, meditation, and other esoteric interests that have long held my attention over the years. Whoever you are, I wish you well.